So let's we have Ukraine is just the beginning. So we're talking about the contours of this new world order or new world they're here to stay. What does a post-war or post-world, post-Ukraine world look like from your vantage point?
Well, I've been living in Asia, or mostly in Asia, and commuting back and forth with the West since 1994. So from my point of view, it's great because I saw the whole process live, meaning the ascension of China, irretrievable ascension of China, on the back of the ascension of the four Asian tigers, the handover of Hong Kong, the end of the Yeltsin years, where Russia was absolutely pillaged, Putin's election that I covered in Moscow in 2000, the slow rebuilding of Russia, and then the completely demented economic ascension of China. So following all these processes from Asia is a completely different perspective than following them from the West. So you understand from the inside, from Hong Kong, from Eastern China, from Shanghai to Beijing, from Moscow, from Central Asia, from Iran under sanctions, a threat of being bombed, etc. And this was even before the JCPOA in 2015. From Turkey, you understand how they are. It's incredible that after these past 15, 20 years, they are finally interconnecting in very meaningful ways, not only rhetoric. And this goes all over the place, especially after the launch of the new Silk Roads by the Chinese 9 years ago, 2013, first in Kazakhstan and then in Indonesia. The Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, the BRICS Bank, the Silk Road Fund, the expansion of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the STO. When you put this all together, it's all going. The train is going. It's on the same high-speed rail track. You know, convergence, sustainable development, trade and connectivity, and even you have something incredible, which is the possibility, for instance, of India and Pakistan thinking ahead of their local regional problems and thinking in terms of integration of South Asia and the rest of Eurasia. You see Russia as a mediator between China and India, for instance. You see the Chinese and the Iranians making long-term deals. You see the Iranians and the Russians also on the verge of making long-term deals as well. You see the Central Asians more integrated with Russia and China. So none of that is examined in detail in the West. I'm not even mentioning the US. I'm talking about Europe here. You just read rhetorical and ideological regurgitations of what the think tank produced in DC. That's it. You know, I was reading the Italians yesterday. It's amazing. It's like I was reading a press release from a think tank in Washington. This is what they do. The Germans, the Marshall Fund, German Marshall Fund, all that crap, absolutely the same thing. And in France, the same. When you watch a political debate in France, even with people from, Institute of Strategic Studies, it's pathetic. It's childish, in fact. And obviously, inside the bubble, you are not allowed to think outside of the bubble. And this brings me to a fabulous interpretation that Alistair Crook, a very good friend of mine, one of the best analysts in the world, he called my attention to a fabulous essay in Russian, then we translate it into English, by a Serbian professor, and he put it in terms of megalopolis against Russia. And megalopolis is a fabulous term that encompasses the Western-centric view of the world, right? And he said this is Russophobia is implicit in the megalopolis view because it's a war against Russia independence. It's a war against the fact that they have the top natural resources on the planet, the top military on the planet, and they're basically undefeatable. And this, from a Western point of view, is, it's anathema. and against the Orthodox Church, which then we get into the clash of Christianisms, Western Christianity against the Orthodox, and of course because Russia basically said through Putin and through Lavrov, we're not going to subscribe to your Great Reset fiction. Just like Xi Jinping also said in Chinese terms, but much more diplomatically. Putin, Lavrov said it, bluntly. We're not part of this game.
You
So
mentioned
obviously,
earlier
yes,
global transformation. So we are living in an age of tectonic global transformation, because today's war is not only against the West, but it's against planetary liberal fascism.
yes.
And so amongst these global changes, that didn't begin 2 months ago. They began several decades ago.
Yes.
And also the cultural and moral self-destruction of Western countries. Can you expand a little bit on that? I know you've talked quite a bit in your articles, in your interviews.
Yes.
Can you talk about this for a little while, please?
Yes, of course. In my latest book, which came out at the start of 2021, it's called Raging 20s. And the subtitle is about exactly what you're talking about, which I borrowing from a book written by a very good, but totally ignored professor at the Sorbonne here in Paris. He coined the term techno-feudalism in English, which is absolutely brilliant as a definition. It's exactly what we have been living, not only since the start of COVID, but even before. And of course, this is an unholy alliance of big tech, of course, major Silicon Valley players, big bank, which is essentially the real masters of the universe, like BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. These are JP Morgan. These are the real masters of the financial universe in the West and most of the world. And big oil. So these three together are organizing and and I forgot probably the most important part, big pharma. That's where the whole COVID is centered. So when we have these big four players acting together, basically, we have how the so-called new reset is being configured. They are going to implement it, of course. You cannot expect that a minor messenger like Klaus Schwab at World Economic Forum, or even Bill Gates, which is he's a living joke for most people who bother to do the research. The real powers behind it are technological, economic, and they organize a sort of techno-feudalism, pyramid style imposed from the top by these elites with advisors such as this extremely toxic character, Yuval Harari, which is the guy behind all the conceptualization of the
transhumanism
behind Klaus Schwab. Yeah, these people are extremely, extremely dangerous because these are the identifiable faces behind this transhumanist, post-humanist, brave new world that they are trying to sell to all of us. Of course, these are messengers. Still, they are messengers. The guys who actually conceptualize all that, they never show up. You're going to see them in rarefied meetings at the Harvard Club or at those clubs in St. James in London. You never see these people. They send their emissaries to Bilderberg, to Davos itself, which they never go. Why bother to go there? Because they decide before, and then they send the messengers. Like Henry Kissinger was always one of their top messengers. But the guy behind Henry Kissinger, we all know who was behind Kissinger from the beginning, right? So this is extremely dangerous because I would say that before the Russian counter coup, they were almost sure that they had practically sold the Great Reset narrative to most of the planet, unsuspecting planet. They even changed the terminology. The last time they changed it to the Great Narrative, which is still the Great Reset. And it's still the messengers that we see at Davos, Bilderberg, G20 meetings, etc., they are not the ones who conceptualized policy, especially what we have been living now, which is the way they think the whole system should be crashed and reconstituted. That's why we have the term Great Reset. First, they were saying that COVID was an opportunity, which is what's stated by Klaus Schwab directly in his, among other places, in his own book. Then they changed to, okay, we need a new narrative, which is still the same thing, but it's a minor terminological difference. And now we have the merging of COVID with this war against Russia, which is in terms of we need to eliminate the main opposing force to our transhumanist, post-humanist plan for the whole of humankind before we address the number one existential threat for us, which is China. So this is where we are in the big picture, in the long run, throughout the rest of the century. This is where we are. It's the begin. That's why they went completely berserk since the start of Operation Z by Russia.